Hi, this is Gerald Sorensen with Remax Home Group and the Twin Power team. So just want to do a little video about something that most people don't want to talk about. Let's talk about evictions. We do a lot of business with investors, and there are people that maybe could be investors, but they don't get into that business because they're like, I don't want to deal with that. Well, it's fresh on my mind because I just went through this. So here I am to tell you, there is a process for this. I've owned rentals since early 2010, and this is only my second eviction. I own 40 properties, so it's not like a daily occurrence, and it's not like I'm really good at it. But I know the process and I know who to talk to about that. First step in the process is the 3-day notice. So they're kind of stringing, let's say they're kind of stringing you out in December and you come to January, they still owe you a little money from December or whatnot. And then they start giving you the runaround in January. Well, January 3rd, go file this 3-day notice. Get the ball rolling, because chances are they're gonna kind of string you out again, and then pretty soon you're 2 or 3 months strung out. Get the process started. The 3-day notice gets served by the processor. You don't have to deal with it. It's all legal. They do it completely through licensed processing. You do that, and then you don't hear anything from them, right? Because they're mad because you served them and you don't hear anything, and their intention was to string you along anyway, so they're thinking, oh, now we're in trouble, right? Or they call you and say they want to give you $100 or whatnot. So don't take partial payments, because as soon as you take anything, then that's how they kind of string that process along. So it really just drags on the whole thing, right? So you don't hear anything in that 3-day notice. You notify the processor, say, hey, yep, I never heard a word. They probably haven't heard a word either. So it goes to the next step where they say, hey, do you want to file for an eviction? So you're like, yep, file for eviction, let's do it. That costs you, I think, about $125, $150, something like that. The processors aren't necessarily, they're not really your legal counsel. They're just processors. So they're not giving you legal advice. They just know the process to do this in, and they can file stuff on your behalf in the courts so that when it gets to that point, it's all done correctly. So if that happens, you get to that step. You go to the next step is you'll get a notice from the courts that, hey, your court date is set for a certain date, whenever it is. Make sure you take that time and you're planning on being there. So if you use a processor, they'll have already submitted to the court all the proper documents. But take a copy of the lease, take any information, any file that you have on this person. Maybe you have some records of when they have or haven't paid. So, but it's important to know that back payments don't really come into play in the eviction process. The eviction is only based on that single month that you're trying to evict them for. So they may have strung you out for 4 months. It's not something you really want to bring up in court. You're really bringing up the fact that, yeah, they did not pay for December, and here we are. And they still haven't paid for December. They haven't paid anything for December, right? So if you've done everything properly, the judge should rule in your favor. A lot of times the tenants won't show up, but if they do, let them talk. Don't argue with them, let them talk to the judge. He'll ask if there's any legal reason why they haven't paid. Like them getting sick or their mom getting sick or something is not a legal reason to not pay. The judge says, okay, yes, I agree, I will file the writ. So you're like, oh, what's that mean? It basically means you can leave the courtroom because you're done. The judge is gonna file the writ. He may ask, especially if the tenant's there, he may say, do you want to file the writ today, or do you want to delay the writ? He'll look at the tenant and say, if they delay the writ a week, will you be out? And the tenant will probably lie and say, yeah, if you delay it a week, we'll be out. And that's up to you. You can say, no, I want it filed immediately. Typically, if you filed immediately, it's still like the next day or maybe the day after before it actually gets filed with the sheriff's office. So the writ is an actual piece of paper from the judge, stamped and everything. And you take that to the sheriff's office along with a little information form. They just want to know who everybody is. If you give it to the sheriff along with $100. So the sheriff has a processing fee for that, which is pretty cheap if you think about it. So that really is buying you an hour of sheriff time. That's 2 sheriffs. I'm sure it costs that more than $100, but It's really nice having those guys there. So I can say that. And it might take a day or it might take a week before the sheriff calls you and says, all right, what's your schedule like? Let's get this set up to go actually serve this paperwork. So the sheriff's gonna go there ahead of that. So let's say he set the date up for like the next Monday, whatnot. He's probably gonna go like that Wednesday or Thursday before that and knock on the door, put an actual note on the door, notice on the door that, hey, this writ has been served, you have to evacuate the property, basically. Most tenants then will just get the heck out because they don't want the sheriff coming in. You get the sheriff in, he goes through the house. If there's anybody in there alive, could be an animal or person, whatnot, he removes them, right? So that they're not in there. And then if there's any stuff in there that's of value, the bad part is if there's any stuff of value that they haven't gotten out, then you have to move that to the curb. So you might need like tarps if it's supposed to rain. You might have to tarp this stuff. You might need garbage bags if it was like just piles of clothing or something and the sheriff's like, yeah, get that stuff out. Recommend you take a few people with you or have some people meet you there, whatnot. Have a locksmith there because you're gonna want to change those locks. Even if they do hand over keys, which they mostly won't. You don't know if that's the only key they have. So just a great idea to get that all changed right then and there. But then once that happens, they put another notice on the door that says if that person, or any person actually, enters the property without the owner's full authority, then they will be arrested. So you're getting to the point where you're almost done with this whole thing, right? But here's the good news. So two things. The sheriff's office is all for you. I mean, they do everything they can to help you, and they'll communicate with you as much as you need to make sure it's a smooth transition, and they handle the legal side of it, right? The processors handle getting it done correctly so that you're not sitting in court trying to explain yourself and maybe you missed something. You gave them a 3-day notice you thought, but it wasn't really a legal form, or maybe they claim they never got it, where the processor has a way of proving that they got it. So it's not an exciting subject, right? But here's the point, it is livable. I mean, it's a process that's in place that you can get through. It's not a reason to not buy rental. Because even this house that I had somebody evicted from, I've made money over the last several years on it. And that tenant has also paid down my payment on it. And I've used the depreciation to write off expenses on other rentals as well. So I still own it. That's the thing. I still own it. I can still move forward. And it only happens very rarely if you go through the whole application process correctly and you really are due diligent in getting your people in there. So Gerald Sorensen, Remax Home Group, Twin Power Team, thank you.